people talk about what is their game of the year. Most people I've seen would say something along the lines of Expedition 33, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Death Stranding 2, something along those lines. But personally, as someone who greatly enjoys story-based games and plays a lot of visual novels where mechanics don't matter much, it's all about the story. For someone like me, Dispatch is absolutely my game of the year. Dispatch is a game made by former Telltale devs. But they managed to do something very interesting with the old Telltale formula. One example of this is the episodic releases. Telltale back in the day used to do monthly or even semi-monthly releases where they'd spend that time making the next chapter. With Dispatch, AdHoc made the entire game beforehand and decided to release it episodically every week. This really resulted in amazing buzz around the game and the choices that people made. I still remember seeing this game being presented at the Game Awards a year ago. At the time, there wasn't that much interest in it other than the fact that Aaron Paul was in it. But it went straight on the top of my wishlist. And on the day it released, I, along with I think 12,000 other players, sat down to play this game. 1 week later, I was joined by another 65,000 players. The week after that, I was joined by 131,000 players. And during the full release of the final episodes, I was playing alongside 220,000 other people. Not only has this game succeeded, they've just crushed it. They've sold 2 million units within a month, and they've reached their bull sales targets for 3 years in just 2 months. And they've received critical acclaim as well as love from fans all over the world. Something that Dispatch has really nailed that not a lot of other games have is being a story-based game but not overcomplicating the story. For all intents and purposes, the story is quite simple and you can see the twists coming. But the lack of complexity within the plot leaves a lot of room for the characters and the humor. A character like Flambe, for example, he gets to start off as a douchebag and end the game as a more likable douchebag. Shroud didn't really have any amazing twists and turns, but he was a great villain, a really cool villain, a perfectly acted villain, a villain who suited the world and the story and the characters. And of course, there was a fantastic performance from everyone involved. I can't remember the last game I played where I could say every character had a perfect performance. So a huge shout out to the actors. So after I finished this game, I was really excited and I went around to look for streamers and YouTubers who had been playing the game to see how they reacted. And there were a couple of things I ran into where I saw streamers and YouTubers react negatively or confused to things where I genuinely couldn't understand what the problem was. Start off with, some people had, not to call anyone specific out, but I know that some people had issues with, let's say, the fart humor in the game. And I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that I thought it was hilarious whenever a character farted, but it really made sense for the characters. It was their sense of humor. It wasn't there as a joke for you. I felt like it made a lot of sense for that to be the character's humor. And we can all have our opinions on that, but I just found it interesting that people were so put off by it. And let me be clear again, it wasn't a lot of people, it was just some people. There were also 2 moments in the story where I saw some negative feedback from streamers and the YouTubers. One of which was when Invisigal expressed her feelings that her power would always lead to her being a villain. And I saw some confusion around this where people would say that, oh, well, that's not true. Obviously, that's not true. And it may not be true, but it made a lot of sense if you just thought about it from her perspective. Of course, you can be a hero with invisibility powers. I think most people would agree with that. But from her perspective, it doesn't feel like that. It's what the character is feeling. And it's very consistent with how she's acting and how she talks about things. It just made a lot of sense to me that she would feel that way. So I was a bit confused when people had a strong reaction to that. Another moment that I know I saw some questions around is what we'd call Chase's crash out. I heard some people say it was out of character for him, but from my point of view, I think it was incredibly in character. If you think about things from his perspective and the way he views the world and his experiences, he's a hero who gave his youth, his life force to do what's right and be a hero. And in the end, he's punished for it, and he can no longer do the things he used to be able to do. Meanwhile, he has to watch as a bunch of villains, people who up until now have only done bad things. He has to watch them be able to do the work that he used to do. He mentions to Robert on the balcony after the crash out that he can't fuck anymore. He can't have relations anymore. And that is such a fair point. It's just one of the many things he can't enjoy anymore. And especially if you go the Invisible route, or even if you go the Blazer route, he has to stand there and watch all of these villains do the job that he used to do. And he has to watch Robert, get a girl, which he can't do the same way anymore. So after quite a few drinks, I just find it a very plausible crash out. I'm not saying that he should crash out. I'm saying that it makes a lot of sense for his character. And he's never liked Invisible anyways. We've seen proof of that several times throughout the entire game. So I just wanted to address those points. Not that those are huge complaints from anyone. It was just something I've noticed as a common thread between a handful of streamers and YouTubers playing the game. Finally, I wanted to mention that I think the very interesting difference between Telltale games and AdHoc so far is that this batch is an original IP. The old Telltale games, they had a formula, they had their art style, but then they would go and license IPs to make games out of. And I don't know about anyone else, but for me personally, that could be quite a turnoff from some games. I think the reason The Wolf Among Us did so well is that it wasn't a very well-known IP in comparison to some of the others. Of course, The Walking Dead started it all off, but once you get down to the second Tales from the Borderlands game and a Minecraft story, what was the point? It's harder to make back the money because you have to pay for the IP. It's harder to tell a story in an already established world where you can't change too much. And if you do, it won't be canon. It makes me wonder if Telltale would have survived, the old Telltale I mean, if they had just tried to make something original. But all things considered, I guess I'm happy they didn't. Because from their ashes rose AdHoc. And if their first game is anything to go by, they have a bright future.